Welcome, everybody, to the American Space Museum. I'm Marquette. We're so glad you're with us to stay curious. Today, we've got a special guest, Frank Norris. Well, greetings, Frank.
Hi.
Good to
Hello,
have you
Mark.
here. Frank is a friend of Marty, my co producer and partner in crime for about 1,040 episodes. Hello, Marty. Say hi to your buddy Frank on the UCAC family microphone.
Hey, buddy Frank and Mark.
They were literally buddies running with each other. These are crazy marathon running guys that just and girls that just at the drop of a hat run 26 miles or whatever on there. And but it was good listening to you guys talk about some old times there. Frank is an aerospace engineer, and he's going to tell us a little bit about his background here in a minute. But he's here today. He worked on the space shuttle reaction control system and the orbital maneuvering system, the big pods there at the back by the stabilizer in the back. We'll hear a little about that. And then he worked on the interesting chapter of American space flight history, the Ares 1X, okay, which I think we're up to 14 years ago, flew the Orion space capsule that's sitting about 15 miles from us over at Kennedy Space Center Visitors Complex. Less than that. Hell, we're about 12 miles away from it. And you'll tell us a little bit about that, as he was the senior vehicle engineer on that single stick rocket that performed pretty good. And then we had a change of heart about the Constellation program. Got a new president, and that changed and keeps changing with the wind. It seems our way we go, the political wind, which way it blows is whether we're going to the moon or Mars or just going to sit here and twiddle our thumbs, Frank.
Yes.
Anyway,
Over time.
So you all going to enjoy Mr. Norris here. Also, finally, he wrote a book, and we're going to find out what inspired him to write a book, Colonizing Mars. Going to need a lot of food on Mars. That's why Marty chose this beautiful green screen here of a greenhouse on Mars. And I have not read this book, but leafing through it as a Mars nut, like I am, this is just not a nonfiction book about going to Mars and La La Land, about going to it. No, he's got a lot of facts in there, a lot of well thought out principles of human beings needing food, air, and water on Mars, and we're going to enjoy hearing Frank talk about that. So, greetings to our humble little program. Frank, tell us a little bit about where you grew up and how you become a aerospace engineer.
Well, I mostly grew up in Florida. I was about 8 years old when my parents moved here. Lived in first Rockledge and then Indy Atlantic here in the local Central Florida area. And
Indy Atlantic's right up on the ocean, so we really feel sorry for him. Were you a surfing kid?
yes, it was.
Were you?
I did surf through my teen years. Was about 3 blocks from the beach.
I hear you. That had to be fun.
Yes, it was.
Uh-huh.
And
So you went you're interested in high school and as a kid in space and what was going on with the Apollo and
was always good in math and science. Actually originally started college to become a doctor, wound up dropping out for a couple of years. Wasn't really that motivated for that, but got really interested in the space program and through some science fiction writers, some science writers, and wanted to do whatever I could to help the space program. So I went back to school, finished my degree in aerospace engineering, and got a job on the shuttle program.
what the college?
University of Florida.
Okay.
Go Gators.
Go Gators. Yeah, I got my Ohio State cap over there to go Buckeyes. But yeah, go Gators. Have fun with that. What the science fiction writers do you enjoy that inspired you?
Read Robert Heinlein, Arthur C. Clarke, probably a couple others not coming to mind at the moment, but some very
Yeah, I like
interesting
Ray
stuff.
Bradbury, who influenced me a lot.
Huh. Yeah.
In there. But yeah, you don't hear many people saying science fiction influenced me into space because I don't think people read a whole lot of science fiction. They watch it on TV. So
Yeah.
in there, we're going to talk
True.
about a fictionalized trip to Mars that he includes in his book here, Colonizing Mars. Frank Norris is going to tell us about that. Yeah, Marty.
It was science fiction back in the day when we grew up. Is now reality.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
True.
True, except for the flying cars, Marty. My dad was always waiting around for the flying car to be in our driveway, in there, as he was one of those crazy experimental aviation guys that would jump on anything with wings and a motor in there. But Frank, let's we'll put this up here a second. There's our little advertising that we did for you up there, and we appreciate everybody watching. Marty, we got the happy birthday sign up there that keeps wanting to pop up. It is Frank Culberson's birthday today. He's 75, in fact, an expedition astronaut, and Tony England's 82 years old, I think, today. But we don't want to detract from our guests when we have them on Stay Curious. This is also Gordon Cooper Day. All right. In 1963, he flew 61 years ago an Atlas II rocket to orbit for a day and a half, the last solo mission of the American space program. We've always gone up in pairs, at least since then.
Yeah.
And Gordon Cooper, of course, passed away at age 77 about 10 years ago. But I think it's exciting, Frank, to think about two American astronauts are going to be on an Atlas rocket again, hopefully Tuesday, May 21st. But it's been 61 years since a human flew a Atlas rocket to space. So we love juxtaposing history like that. So that's our history lesson for today, folks. But let's get a little lesson about the shuttle that we talk a lot about. In fact, tomorrow we're going to have Terry White, the orbital process in chief, to tell us all about the pit stops there in the process in the shuttle. But you worked on these fat little chubs in the back of the shuttle, so familiar to the profile of it, called the orbital processing.
Orbital
maneuvering system. Yeah.
And also it contains a reaction control system. But it's all the rockets that are used in space or were used in space on the shuttle to maneuver around, to change orbits, to go up and dock with the space station or whatever they happen to be doing on that particular mission, and to deorbit. You have to slow down to come back.
Yeah.
And anyways, all of those. I was an engineer and engineering supervisor on the group for many years. I guess about 15 before I wound up getting involved in special projects and working other things.
What was your first shuttle launch? Do you remember?
I came here to watch STS. I actually graduated in June of '81, about 2 months after the STS-1, and I got a job in Downey, California, and I was working out there for about the first year and a half, and that was STS 2 through 4, I believe. Went out while I was still in California, but I was back here soon after that in late '82, and I've been at Kennedy Space Center continuously until 2012. So for 30 years.
Well, just like Marty putting in 30 years in the program there, and of course it ended in 2011, and we love talking about the shuttle era, the shuttles of the month. There's 10 shuttles launched in the month of May. Ironically, Challenger and Columbia didn't have any of their missions in May, and that's something we do, Frank, is highlight that. Excuse me, and consider you space workers really national treasures for doing something that's never been translated before in space. Let's look at a couple other pictures. He's not going to give us too many details, but I did detail a picture here for y'all to understand. There's a series of reaction control thrusters. At the top's the one on the nose, right?
Yes. Yeah, the top is on the nose. It was right in front of the crew compartment. And the back ones are the big bump things, or the bumps on the back end of the shuttle.
Yeah.
But you can see the tanks. The ones that are highlighted in the lower picture is the OMS tanks. And then the ones that are not highlighted are the RCS tanks.
So both fuel systems are inside the domed area there.
Yes, they are.
Okay, so the pink area, its exhaust goes out the big nozzle, and that's what they use to slow down.
Yes.
And then the other oxidizer for the hypergolics, right? In the RCS.
Yeah, it is hypergolics on both. It's the same propellants for both systems, but the OMS is a bigger engine. It was used for orbit changes, get a lot more thrust out of it. and they would use that to go up to a higher orbit or to come back down from a high orbit.
And there's
The small RCS thrusters were more of attitude control, including during entry. It didn't fly aerodynamically until it got below 50,000 feet. Before that,
Okay.
it was all the reaction control system firing to keep it pointed the right way.
and this is an unusual picture of looking at one of them taken off for servicing. I
Yes.
think people find that interesting that you actually take pieces of the shuttle off and look at them, and here's an ohms pod on a bench there.
Yes, it is.
What would people be doing to it there? Is this sort of a familiar workplace for you?
Yeah, that picture is actually in the orbiter processing facility, but we took those down to the hypergolic maintenance facility, which was a separated facility just for working on these ohms pods and the Ford RCS. Very toxic commodities, and
Yeah,
so it was better
very
to be
toxic.
isolated way away from everybody else. So if we had any venting or anything, it wouldn't hurt anybody.
We talked about those hypergolics are nasty stuff. A little eyedropper drop of it will go through a table or concrete, or I mean, it can. Very.
Yeah, the oxidizer is also known as anhydrous nitric acid. If you add a little bit of moisture to it, it forms nitric acid.
Ah,
So that's the one that will eat through things. And
okay.
the other one, monomethyl hydrazine, is just very toxic
Huh.
and even causes cancer in low doses over extended periods.
Well,
Very
a
nasty
lot of
stuff.
safety, of course, we've learned with the NASA community and the mindset there. And just found that interesting how you take all those apart. Of course, you got to be careful with the tiles. I'm sure that's a whole other thing in the shuttle era there. So, anything else you wanted to say about your shuttle career there?
No, just it was very interesting crawling all through those things. Used to take astronauts on tours at the hypergolic maintenance facility all the time because you could actually see like inside of it and see all the components. And they found that very interesting to see all these components that they'd only seen on a schematic before. They
Yeah.
didn't even know what the components look like, but would actually show them, yeah, the line goes this way and runs through here, and those are regulators and your isolation valves. And they always found that very interesting.
Yeah, that's what I was showing this picture beforehand here. You don't think of what is that, you could say. And looks like they've got capped off the nozzle vent, but on the far left are two reaction control.
Yeah, actually, in this picture, the ohms nozzle has been removed. I don't know if the engine was actually removed or just the nozzle,
Yeah,
but
okay.
the open side of the ohms pod there, which is the side that attaches to the orbiter, you can see the tanks and all the lines and things inside of it.
You normally see the big nozzle there,
Yeah, and
two,
only the
one
big
on
nozzle
either
would be there.
side. That's what they
the
use to
nozzle's
slow
missing.
down and raise the height. And then the far left, Marty, are the more ones that
Yeah, the reaction control system.
far left. Yeah, there you go.
Yes, there.
They would boom like cannons, right?
Yes, they did. I
It-
heard them many times out at was it White Sands Test Facility
Uh-huh.
before, and they'd fire them and sound like a howitzer going off
Oh, wow.
from like the next hill over.
Of course, there's no sound in space, but they can hear it inside the atmosphere of the space station. And they, I know some of them comment about how the first few times it's really noisy, But that's what you hear them popping off all the time as the ship is coming in for reentry. That's what it's supposed to do, right?
Yeah, you mostly can see little puffs. You might have heard a little something, a little bit of a sound, but they don't fire them below 50,000 feet or didn't. So
Gotcha.
they're pretty far away when they're firing, but you can see the little puff when it happens.
There you
could-
see a couple workers up on the hoist up there to give you an idea what's going on. I love pictures like this. This is what our space workers are all about, doing things and taking things apart. And then they just ain't going down the road. They're going around the orbit to Earth for 1,000,000 miles or so on there. Well, what was were these a high maintenance item or occasional? How would you characterize this?
Occasionally
hardware.
something would have to come off after a flight. Most of the work at the HMF probably would do an orbiter maintenance down period about every 9 or 10 flights, and it would go down there for some major refurbishment and inspections at that time. But occasionally there would be some component failure, maybe every third or fourth flight. There'd be a component failure where they'd pull the pod off and take it down to the HMF to replace those parts. Because down there you can actually get to the all that plumbing inside.
Right. And was there some pressure from the schedule, how you did the maintenance? The
Uh,
flow, as you all called it?
yeah, there was always some schedule pressure. You'd hear it if we were falling behind schedule or something. It would We'd figure out ahead of time, okay, we need to get that piece of hardware down here for 3 weeks to do that repair, and do all the testing while it's here too. And there'd be always pressure to hurry up and get that back in time. You're holding up the whole orbiter flow.
Well, very interesting. We're talking here with Frank Norris. Frank, you're doing a great job. Just relax. We're enjoying this out there. We got Marty, you got a comment?
I got a question for Frank, although I know the answer. Frank, who did your software?
Marty's group did that. Actually, my wife Ann. That's how I met her. Marty hired her, and she was doing software for our group.
And your wife is a software person or
Yes, she is.
configuration management or?
No, she's a software engineer.
Okay, well that's all right. And Marty, she worked with you. You said, huh? What's her name?
Ann?
Ann. Hi, Ann. Does Ann run like the wind too, like you guys?
Ann used to run. She walks now.
All right. Well, hi, Ann. Hope you're enjoying your husband, Frank, here's doing a great job. We'd love to have you on Stay Curious also sometime. She knows Janine Pape then, I'd say, right, Marty?
Oh, yeah.
And Janine has been on the show. We need to get Janine back here. But Janine, thank you for watching, because I know she's out there occasionally watching Stay Curious. I know Hazel Banks is watching. Hayes, thank you for all your support of the museum. We've got Robert Laws watching from Dundee, Scotland. Hi, Robert. Good afternoon to all, says Tom Usiak from Pennsylvania. We've got Suta Laika B. She's watching today. Carlton Bailey is in Canaveral Groves. And he says, have a happy day today and a better tomorrow. So, but it's we're having a great time. And Steve Jokums is saying hi. He is up in Fox Lake, Illinois. Has a company called Lake County Spaceport that does decals for a lot of models like the shuttle on there. And Gary Gerald's in Georgia. Doug Forrest is in California. And William Whiting is here in Merritt Island. No, he's not Merritt Island. He's in Brevard County. Titusville. Brevard County, the birthplace of our American Space Museum. That's what we're sitting in here.
And he's TDY from Michigan.
Yes, that's right, exactly. So thank you all for watching today. Regulars that I know are going to enjoy some more of what Frank's got to talk about. We're going to get to his book, Colonizing Mars, which really looks very, very pragmatic approach. It looks like we'll find out. But one of the programs that Frank was involved in as a senior vehicle engineer was the Ares 1X, the development test flight of America's Constellation program to go to the moon by 2020.
Yes, it was. We actually, the Ares 1X was a test flight. It was a real first stage, but a dummy second stage, but heavily instrumented. And even though the Constellation program got canceled, we talked them into letting us go ahead and fly it because we had it almost ready to go. And so we did fly it, get all that test data, incredible amount. It was incredibly instrumented. But I did that for about 2 years, I guess. I think from 2007 to 2009 when we launched was the senior vehicle engineer, which the way I would describe that, it was like an engineering lead over the whole effort. There was a chief engineer that made sure that we did things right, like technical issues would go to them. I was more making sure that we did the right things. Would work with all the different groups. We had space shuttle engineers that were working on this test vehicle that was not space shuttle at all, but had to map kind of between the systems of which things different groups would work on this test flight. And did that, helped set up all the procedures for how we were going to do things. And we had a successful flight in 2009.
That you did, right around Halloween, October 28th. A lot of us remember that from Launch Pad 39B. and it was not used again until 13 years later when Artemis 1 did take off of that pad. But this was a single stick rocket. Was it solid fuels on that first stage?
Yes, the first stage was a solid rocket booster. It was supposed to be a 5-segment version of the space shuttle, like what is on the SLS.
Uh-huh.
But it was a solid solid fuel first stage and a liquid fuel second stage, plus a capsule up there. Although the everything above the first stage was just heavily instrumented dummy hardware for that one test flight.
They had the Orion vehicle on there that flew, that is now out Kennedy Space Center Visitors Complex. Seen that many, many times. The Constellation program, to refresh everybody's memory, was the Orion spacecraft, the Ares rocket, and the Altair lunar lander. There's the patches for these from the George Bush administration. The Constellation program was just like they're talking about now, going to the moon and Mars, and then it got scrapped by the Obama administration. There it is out on the pad. You'll never see the reaction. The RSS remote service structure has now been dismantled, and pieces everywhere, probably of it around the Cape out there. But pretty interesting looking rocket there.
Yes,
You don't see many rockets where the second stage is wider than the first stage.
that's true.
Was that an engineering problem?
No,
No.
it was not really a problem. Makes it slightly less stable, but it was still easy to control.
Uh-huh. And so the big day you're leading up to this, what were you making sure happened? What was your overall responsibility? Is what I'm saying, Frank.
A lot of the things were just working with the different groups, making sure they worked off all the issues. I remember the night that we rolled to the pad, I was at work until about 11 o'clock at night. I was there at 6 o'clock in the morning and still there until about 11 o'clock at night, just trying to get all of the constraints cleared so that we could actually roll out that night. I had to talk with lots of different engineers and either get them to clear them or clear them for them once we resolved issues.
As I read up on this quickly today for your visit, Frank, one of the concerns was thrust oscillation with this solid rocket, that there would be too much movement, that astronauts wouldn't be able to endure it in there. But they found that the risk was not there for that, according to the instrumentation said it was on there. But see how it's moving away from the pad. It had a quick thrust vector to get away there, and what I found here was pad damage out there. They reported, let's see here, substantial, both pad elevators. This was a significantly more direct rocket exhaust that ever occurred during a normal space shuttle launch because of the liftoff had to have the pad avoidance maneuver. The resulting damage was substantial. Both pad elevators were rendered inoperable. All communication lines between the pad and launch control were destroyed, and all outdoor megaphones melted. So the vehicle-facing portions of the fixed service structure appeared to suffer extreme heat damage and scorching, so the damage was anticipated because they were going to remove the fixed service structure anyway. So, but thought that was interesting. Little sidebar there to that, and we've got, once again, there was a lot of instrumentation that on the vehicle. There's a cool shot of the launch control complex there, of it going up middle of the day on October 28th, 2009. Again, the patches of our Constellation program where we were going back to the moon. And I found this. It said there's Altair. I'll bet that's a good quiz question. What was the Constellation moon vehicle name? Program named Altair. Is the new lunar lander that will return astronauts to the surface of the moon by 2020. So that said 15 years ago.
There's something interesting. Also, the Ares, it was two different rockets, the single stick and a big one. And basically, when they canceled the Constellation and started the Artemis program, they just scrapped the little one and kept the big rocket, which is basically the same thing as the SLS.
Okay. So there's a lot of leftovers from the Constellation
Yes, there is.
program. The Obama administration wanted to concentrate on making Kennedy Space Center and Canaveral Spaceport a multi-user by industry,
Mhm.
right?
Yes.
And they've succeeded at doing it beautifully. I mean, my gosh, they're even doubling up pads out there because they have such demand for it.
Hmm.
We were talking to Via Space, and they're sharing their pad with another rocket company called Phantom. They're at the old pad 13,
Huh.
which is the landing zone 1 and 2 for SpaceX
SpaceX.
right now.
Hmm.
And SpaceX is going to be required to land their spacecraft where they launched them, the
Huh.
pad they launched them from. Such is the demand for all those Rocket Row pads out there. It's
Mhm.
pretty amazing, isn't it? You've lived
Yes.
through that, 30 years in the shuttle. In this, characterize what you see going on out there, Frank.
Uh, there are a lot more private companies out there. SpaceX has got two different pads. Blue Origin's going to be launching in the not too distant future. Um, a lot of companies getting involved.
What do you think about the New Glenn rocket? It's huge, over 300 feet tall.
It is huge. It's not as big as Starship that SpaceX has, but it is huge. It's a very big rocket. Same propellants, the methane LOX combination
Uh-huh.
that Starship has. And,
Is methane more efficient getting away from hydrogen? What's the story on
Uh,
that, Frank?
hydrogen is actually slightly more efficient, but it's so low density that you wind up with massive tanks. And the methane is much more dense, about 6 or 7 times as dense as hydrogen.
6 or 7 times, so you
Yeah.
can get
You can get a lot more in a
in
small
a
tank.
smaller volume.
Yeah, so the rocket doesn't wind up being as big.
Right.
You know, that's why the shuttle had that huge external tank with just a massive amount of.
Yeah, I characterize
propulsion.
the shuttle tank as going back to a 500-mile trip somewhere. Instead of getting your tank filled with a full tank of gas, you dig up the reservoir that's at the gas station, put it on top of your car, and run a garden hose into your. That's the shuttle.
Yeah, yeah, it's interesting. In my book, I made the analogy of the way that everybody else has been launching rockets is they launch it once and throw the rocket away. But SpaceX with the Starship came up with this whole new concept. Why don't we just put gas in it and fly it again?
Yeah. Good.
I
Good.
made the analogy of driving to grandma's house, like 750 miles. If I was going to do it the old way, I'd take a semi truck and have a pickup truck and a car in the back, drive the semi until it runs out of gas, and then pull the other two vehicles out, use the pickup truck to tow the car until it ran out of gas, and then drive the car and get to grandma's house. And I said, if that was the way we did it, it would never happen because it'd be about $300,000 each way.
Yeah, that's a
So,
3-stage trip to grandma's house.
yeah.
That's
So
a,
instead, what we did is just we'd stop for gas.
I
It
love
cost
that
a couple $100.
yeah, exactly.
And that's what they're trying to do with Starship.
And we're going to talk about that now. Tom Celentano's saying hi. He's anxious to what you got to say about your book. Suta Laka's watching. Always thought this was an awesome launch. Thank you for your experience. She's alluding to the Ares 1X on there.
Interesting. Thank you.
We've got posters that I've seen and all kinds of things where people were really excited about that launch. It had an crewed vehicle. All right. Like I said, that I don't know how it's changed in 13 years from the Orion that flew the demo mission. Be 2 years in November on the Artemis rocket. So, but here's your book. All right. And did I bring up I didn't bring over my, I guess I didn't print that out with the book. Tell us the synopsis of your book here, Frank.
Actually, let me tell you a little bit about how I got started on it. Back in early 2022, I read the book The Case for Mars for the first time. In it, Robert Zubrin talks about how to go to Mars a whole lot cheaper than the way that the government does it, or the way that plans had been at that time. he said, why not launch 2 medium-sized rockets, send one ahead, and it's your return vehicle, and you land on Mars, and then have a little fuel factory. They actually manufacture your return fuel from, if you have water ice and CO2, you can make methane and LOX. And actually have a fuel factory and have it automated and refuel itself. And you don't launch until your return vehicle's fueled and ready to go. So you launch and go to Mars with, I think he was saying, a 2 or 3 stage rocket. But anyway, I was absolutely fascinated by that and was checking his math and like really researching all these topics. And I came across a video of Elon Musk standing there in front of a Starship. And this was in early 2022, like maybe May or June or something. And he was talking about, we're going to colonize Mars, and this is the rocket that's going to do it. And I started diving into that and got really excited about it. And it's like, yes, you know, I checked their math. Yes, this thing can really launch over 100 tons into orbit. You know, it really would work to refuel it in orbit and then refuel it again on Mars. And just started diving into the concept of how you would actually colonize Mars and work through. I mean, I spent months, 16 hours a day researching, but came up with a complete infrastructure of how you could really do it and wrote the book.
Well, it's very easy to read. It's not, there's some technical things in there that you want because you're a aerospace engineer, and you've got things about the charging depot requirements. You've got maps of Mars that put landing sites, the cosmic radiation levels. Oh, that's my favorite photo of Mars. It's never publicized.
The Korolev crater.
Yeah, the Korolev crater that's got a ice rink in there, basically. All right.
Yeah, it's 51 miles wide and about 2 miles deep of water ice.
Yeah, in the polar region up there. I thought that had become the poster child of going back to Mars on there, because there's real water on the surface. We've had a lander that landed at the pole, the exhaust from Phoenix lander, exposed blocks of ice frozen up under there. We're not sure how pure that water is or whatever.
Yeah, Phoenix actually did a sample. It scraped off about 2 inches and did a sample of it and found that it was 60% water ice.
Wow.
It was basically frozen mud.
Jeez.
And on Mars, everything from about 45 degrees latitude to the poles is like that. One of the maps I have in there of Mars is the depth to water ice that NASA mapped out. And it's less than a meter to get to water ice from 45 degrees to the poles, both poles.
Wow. If there's 3 feet down, you're going to dig in some water. And not only where there's water is there the resource to keep humans alive, but where there's water, we've always found life. And you know, I'm convinced Mars is teeming with life below the surface, away from the radiation.
You know,
And other
it would have to
factors
be
that you're
below
going
the
to talk
surface.
about that.
Yeah, on the surface of Mars, you can't have liquid water, and all life seems to need liquid water, even bacteria.
True. Okay. But underneath in caves, could be another
There could be
story.
underground water. There could be a lot of things.
There's a popular photo we see a lot of the Starship complex on Mars. These are your slides we're racking up here, Frank. So,
Okay. Yeah, that's an artist concept of the space colony that SpaceX might create. The only thing I don't like about it is the geodesic dome. A geodesic dome would be horrible. You're going to have to hold in several psi of pressure. And a geodesic dome would be horribly heavy if it's going to actually support that. I actually found that, researched a whole lot of different ways. I think that the real answer is very tough inflatable structures, like huge balloons, basically. And I'll actually show that in a couple of slides here.
Bigelow is one of the companies. You're familiar with the company Bigelow, and they've actually got an inflatable addition on the space station that they kept up there. Are you talking about those type of habitats?
Yeah,
like
that type of structure. Yeah, actually, the habitats, the way I described it in the book, did all the math and designed all this stuff, um, is a Kevlar cylinder with a polyethylene bladder in it so that it doesn't leak at all. But
Uh-huh.
the Kevlar gives it the strength to hold the pressure in. Because I actually, I'm talking about some pretty big structures. Uh, I think the habitat was 8 meters in diameter and 200 and, excuse me, it's 26 and a half feet in diameter. I won't go metric here, but could.
Yeah.
8 meters, and it's 90 meters long, which is about 290 feet. So talking about a big structure, but inflatable.
Like a football field almost.
Yeah,
290 feet. You're looking, people
about the length of a football
uh,
field. And
are seeing a field house, maybe where athletics are inside, track and field and stuff like that. Yeah.
and a structure like that, the shell anyway, is only about a quarter of a ton to actually have a safety factor of 8 on the strength. And that was based on 5 psi inside. That seemed like a better idea to me, to keep the pressure down and just go higher percent oxygen. 5 psi at 62% oxygen is about the same as sea level on Earth. You just took a lot of the nitrogen out of the atmosphere.
Very interesting. As I said, this book's got some very pragmatic and mathematic evidence there of what he's talking about. There's a
Yeah, this is one picture that's not in my book, because actually this is one of the test flights. And when I wrote the book, none of the test flights had happened yet. I actually finished the book right around the end of 2022, and it took until November 2023 for it to get published. But at the time I wrote it, none of the test flights had happened yet.
talking about colonizing Mars, how it will happen in our lifetime. You say Marty's lifetime, huh?
Mine,
We
I don't know
better
about
hurry up,
Marty's.
Frank.
Yeah, mine, I don't know about Marty's.
Yeah, right. Well, I've never seen this cutaway of inside of a starship. Very interesting.
Yeah, threw this in this picture's in my book also. Just an artist concept basically of the inside of Starship. I don't think people really appreciate how big it is inside.
Putting those people inside now helps you appreciate it. Yeah.
Yeah. But it's like several stories long. The part that is crew and cargo, I think about 55 or 60 feet long, and 9 meters or about 29 feet in diameter. The inside of the Starship is about the same volume as a 4,000 square foot house.
Wow. 4,000 square foot.
Yeah, we're not talking anything like a capsule. We're talking a big structure.
Yeah.
And that's, the first just over 100 feet of the rocket are fuel tanks and engines, but the top 55 or 60 feet is all area for people. So you can take a lot.
Okay,
going
well,
somewhere.
Marty and I want to know where they stow the ladder to get out of that thing down to the surface, or the rope.
Yeah, in
We've
my book, I describe the concept of having an airlock on the lowest level of that part where the people are, and having to have a winch system to lower things down to the surface, because you're still about 100 feet up in the air.
Yeah, exactly. Well, we got to talk orbital mechanics here a little bit.
We're just how you get from the Earth to Mars is, this is often called a Hohmann transfer. That's the least energy way you can do it. Takes about 8.5 months, but basically what you're doing, you're accelerating when you're in Earth orbit, and it puts you on that elliptical trajectory that crosses Mars' path. And then when you get to Mars, you either use aerodynamics or rocket engines to accelerate just a little bit more to circularize your orbit there. You can easily do that, though, with Mars as aero capture. In fact, all of our probes that have gone there in the last several years have done aero capture, where they just kind of dive into the atmosphere and it slows them down, and they can do it into orbit or direct landing, either one.
Here's the look at an aero capture of the Starship.
Yep, that's their depiction of the Starship coming into Mars with the aero heating, which we actually saw that on Flight Test 3.
Absolutely.
There's a lot of footage.
That mesmerized everybody seeing those images of the starship with the plasma coming off of it.
Yeah. The only difference is with Mars, the air is so thin that, at least according to the simulation on SpaceX's website, it can only get down to about Mach 2 that way, and then it has to turn around and use the engines to slow down and land. But
Okay.
can slow down from, Mach 30 coming in to about Mach 2.
All right. And here's a little schematic you put together about the fueling that has to go on.
Yes, it is. I mentioned that to go to Mars, it has to refuel in orbit, which they plan to have tankers and go up and transfer propellant in orbit to refuel it. It takes about 2/3 of a load to get to Mars and land, but it has to refuel there. Even a full load, it can do Earth orbit to Mars orbit and back, but it cannot do Earth orbit to Mars ground and back. Just it would take more fuel than it has. But you can refuel on Mars. All you need is CO2 and water ice. And the CO2 is in the atmosphere. That's depicted on the top line. And actually designed all these components in order to come up with what the size and mass of them were, because they're going to have to haul all this with them. And the water CO2 is the top line going in. The one coming in from the far left is water ice. What they're going to have to do, I believe, because it's significantly contaminated with salts and probably also with dirt, they're going to have to distill it, like put it on a microwave, a tightly sealed microwave,
Yeah.
bake it, and catch the steam coming off.
Evaporate and catch the steam.
Catch the steam, and that way they'll get pure water and can use that for electrolysis.
A still, making a still out of the thing, basically.
Yeah, pretty much, except you're collecting water, not liquor.
Yeah.
But it is basically a still. And split it, the hydrogen goes one direction, it and CO2, if you mix them in something called a Sabatier reactor, it forms methane and water. And the methane is directly usable. The water they just recycle back and send it through electrolysis again. You split off the oxygen, and that's your two propellants that they have to chill and pump in the ship.
Well, it looks complicated, but it's simple things like an alcohol still or something like that. You're just using the same principles of the laws of physics, but now you're using them on Mars, which has 1/3 the gravity of Earth. So all that's considered into this.
Yes.
In there. So is it easier to evaporate in lower gravity? It might be, huh?
The gravity doesn't really make a difference, just the pressure.
Pressure, atmospheric pressure
yeah,
would be more,
It will, if you're lower atmospheric pressure, it'll boil at a lower temperature.
Right. Yeah, right. Yeah, the gravity wouldn't, but the amount of atmosphere and the weight of that atmosphere on the planet and Mars's atmosphere is incredibly thin. At the surface, it's like Mount Everest on Earth. It's 1/10, if we're lucky, of the Earth's surface on there. I make the analogy a lot, Frank, that they say it's 50 degrees on Mars, but that's at your feet. The atmosphere is so thin that at your knees it would be 0, and on top of your head it might be 10 below 0. Just a 6-foot layer there would have that much of a temperature difference, wouldn't it?
Yeah, because the air's so thin, it chills a lot overnight. Like they've measured daytime highs on Mars as high as about 70 degrees Fahrenheit, which is about 21 Celsius, and but overnight it goes way below 0, way below 50 or 100 degrees below 0.
All right, great. We're enjoying. Now, here's what a habitat would look like if we were.
Yeah, I mentioned the inflatable. This is a depiction, like a cutaway of a habitat. Anytime you're making a balloon, it's going to be either a sphere or a cylinder or something in between. You can't do something with like a flat side in a balloon. So the idea would be you make this long cylinder, you dig a trench, and you bury it halfway, and then fill it up halfway with dirt so you've got a floor. And in the case of the habitat, I'm sure there'd be a moisture seal and some kind of flooring over that. Nobody wants to walk on dirt all the time. In the greenhouses, though, the dirt's perfect. That's where you're going to grow the plants. But it also something that showed here, the radiation levels on Mars actually, well, they're way higher than most places on Earth. There actually are places on Earth, and one of them is Ramsar Iran, that is almost the same radiation level as Mars. And it's because they have this radioactive spring near there, and they took the limestone out of it and built the city.
And this is where at?
Ramsar, Iran.
Oh,
And there are a few
Iran.
other places like that, but Ramsar is actually a tourist resort these days. But the radiation there is about 40 times what it is on most of Earth. But the people are fine.
We're
Nobody's
talking
dying
about
from it.
radiation. I threw this chart in there. On the far right is Mars radiation, 500 days on Mars. And as you see on the U.S. annual average, all sources, there is a value. What is that? Dose equivalent what's that?
Millisevering, probably.
Yeah, millisievert. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you're going to get a year on Earth is the second column from the left, the red on Mars, and the journey to Mars also is showing you is heavy radiation on there. Just to give you an idea, it's a big consideration.
Yeah, and there is variation on Mars. Any place that you have more atmosphere above you, there's less radiation. Radiation level in some of the northern plains is about half of what it is over a lot of the surface of Mars.
Okay.
So it's a lot lower. But anyway, the idea there was that, there are places on Earth where people are perfectly okay. Apparently, people can tolerate a little more of a chronic dose as long as it's slow. What kills you with radiation is if you get a sudden dose, your body just cannot recover from it. It can't repair the damage.
Oh, okay.
But your body is constantly replacing cells and can actually tolerate some levels of chronic radiation, low level chronic radiation. But on the habitat, because you can,
Oh, yeah.
suggested you put about 4 feet of the Martian soil on top of it, or 1.3 meters. That is enough to get it where it is Earth normal radiation inside.
So we're going to have to insulate it, and the best insulation is what's there, the Mars regolith or soil.
Yes.
Same concept we have on the moon to bury structures under the moon dirt so that it gets insulated from radiation.
Yeah, and anyway, if they have the habitat covered like that, it's Earth normal level inside. They probably spend at least half their day in there because they're going to sleep in there and eat in there. If they spend a couple of hours a day outside or in a greenhouse, they'll be getting way less radiation than Ramsar or Ron, and therefore they should be perfectly fine to spend a few hours outside.
Imagine you're looking down on a Mars habitat that's in the middle, in the green. What are the green there?
The green is all greenhouses.
We're going to need a lot of food. I like seeing that.
A lot of food.
Just like there's a greenhouse there.
Yeah, that's a kind of a depiction of what it might look like inside. You're going to have, this was sized for 14 people, which presumably be like 7 couples or the equivalent in families.
All right.
It's probably not going to be a lot of single individuals. It's going to be more like families would go or couples would go if you're actually going to go there and stay. But a study back in the 70s came up with a number of, like, the minimum area to grow enough food for a person is about 4,000 square feet, which is roughly 1/10 of an acre. And its size for that, that's about 1.3 acres of greenhouse space. Those greenhouses are like 107 meters long, which is 350 feet, and 8.5 meters in diameter, which is like 28 feet. And so they're actually very large structures. It's hard to get a good feel for that. Another issue with Mars.
Yeah, it is. Again, yeah, almost 300 by 28. Wow, yeah.
Yeah, another issue with Mars is the light level is only 52% of what it is on Earth, sunlight. That's good enough for many crops, but not all of them. Some crops need more direct sunlight than that. But the idea with the mylar reflectors that are shown on the outside there is they direct more light in, so you can get up much closer to an Earth level of sunlight. But they also provide heat, because directing all that in there, greenhouses, I mean, the whole idea there is you're capturing the sunlight gets in, and infrared doesn't go out, that it's captured by the greenhouse. But with those Mylar reflectors out there, those greenhouses would actually be like 70, 80 degrees during the day, Fahrenheit, like 20 or 30 Celsius. And it wouldn't be a whole lot colder at night just because it would be a very moist environment.
Excellent. We're enjoying this conversation with Frank Norris. He's an aerospace worker who worked on the Space Shuttle reaction control system and the OMS pods. Then he was on Ares 1X, our constellation rocket to take us back to the moon in 2020. And not your fault that we didn't make it there, Frank. That rocket worked fine. But then he's got this great little book here that's a great read. $13 paperback. I think it was about $17 or $20 on Amazon hardback. Easy to understand with a lot of just the right amount, I think, of science graphs and so forth to let you know he knows what he's talking about and very pragmatic about in the next 20 years. We could be on Mars with Elon Musk's Starship. Marty, you got a question?
Yeah, Frank, what about meat?
Uh,
They're going to be vegetarians, basically?
I think that's probably the concept, unless they take it with them. Animals animals consume more calories than they will ever produce, and they also take about 10 times as much land area as plants. So they probably, unless it's something small like fish tanks or rabbits or something, they probably are not going to be producing any meat there, at least not initially.
Yeah, meat protein could be really obsolete, and unless chickens, but chickens take a lot of space, and
Yeah, take a lot of space, and they eat more grain than
yeah.
the calories
I
that they
like this
produce.
that you said it was only about 1.5 acres to support 14 people.
Yes.
That's a good ratio, I think, there.
Mhm.
On there, very manageable. Once again, when you're looking down on this, you're looking at almost 300 feet by 28 feet. So you're again, think of a football field, and the football field's 40 feet wide, or 40 yards wide, 120 feet wide. Yeah, 120 by 300 is a soccer pitch or football field type of thing. So there's our background there. There's an idea. And Frank just gave us a great idea why geodesic domes are not practical, way too heavy. So the romance of looking out the windows might be something to forego, right?
Yeah, it did show that on the greenhouses. So you would have some area that felt like outdoor space anyway in the greenhouse. With the idea of the greenhouse, it's still, the polyethylene is not quite strong enough. So you'd probably have a Kevlar like fishnet over the top of it to reinforce it.
Okay.
In the case of the greenhouse that's shown in the background there.
Let's see. Suta Laika says, dang, no more steak, Marty. And Steve Jokums, maybe plant-based meat products might be a solution for the colonists. And that's, he's obviously not eating one of those. I'm joking.
I eat Beyond Burgers all the time.
I'm
I
thinking
think
the same thing.
Were you, Marty? Steve, we're making a joke there, but some of that stuff is very has some good flavor to it and so forth, and food is going to be reimagined. Let's face it that way. But I could see a lot of fish type of things maybe in the space there. As we look at a couple more kind of science fiction pictures, tell us another reason why we should buy your book, Colonizing Mars. Frank.
Well, I think it's a pretty good read. I've had many people tell me that, but it's a methodical trip through the whole thing of how this could really work and how we will do it in the next 20 years or so.
And it is. We just scanning through it. Very pragmatic, methodical. Like you said, you talk about transmitting light with silica aerogels there. I know one thing I was going to point out that I loved was people seem to not understand Mars as a planet, and at least once a decade, it seems to have a global dust storm that envelops the whole planet. Now, the planet Mars is half the size of Earth. Big in our minds, but people are kind of amazed to find out it's only 4,000 miles across, and the Earth is about 8,000. So it's half our size, and then the moon's half the size of Mars. But we don't know what triggers it, but this fine Martian dust gets up in the air and stays up there for months on end and has ruined some space probes. It ruined the opposition of Mars in, I think, 2018 was an opposition that I was in the backyard wanting to see the surface of Mars, and it was clouded out, so to speak, but it was dusted out. So you mentioned that, Frank.
Yeah, I did talk about the dust storms. In the book, I didn't have the data yet, but said, you can still see some of the structure of Mars. So it's not 100% elimination of the sunlight. Since there's been some data off of Curiosity and Perseverance, that it's about a 35% reduction in sunlight. So it's not as bad as it looks, but yeah, those dust storms, they start at, Mars is in an elliptical orbit, a little more elliptical than Earth is. And at its closest approach to the sun, it's the solar, or the summer solstice in the southern hemisphere. And a whole lot of CO2 frost melts off the polar cap, which the polar cap is mostly water ice, but there's like a CO2 frost on it. And it seems that that's kind of the trigger that actually gets the storms going. And it happens every Mars year that there's some level of storms. But for some reason, every 3 years, they tend to be global, which every 3 Mars years is about 5 Earth years.
Yeah.
But they don't fully understand why, unless it just takes that long for it to return to the right starting conditions or what it is. But it about every 3 Mars years.
Another thing to solve
global.
before we go to Mars, or while we're at Mars, the dust is very fine grained like talcum powder, so it's going to get in mechanical things, respiratory problems maybe, but it is a cyclic thing on Mars there that actually brought down one of our rovers. Our Spirit died during the storm because it wasn't pointed in the right direction, the solar panels on there. But you'll learn a lot about Mars itself, about the realities of living on Mars, why Frank Norris thinks that it's going to happen in our lifetimes in the next 20 years. So we'll talk to Marty in the nursing home about it when it does on there. We'll wheel the camera, we'll wheel that in there. So thank you, everybody, for watching. What a great today. Cliff Watson is watching in Pomona, Australia. He says veggie burgers is the way to go there. So Frank did enjoy this a lot, learned a lot. You've had a fascinating career. Is writing your next calling? Are you interested in doing more with Mars or other subjects?
Yeah, I really might. I've actually written a second book. It hadn't been published yet. I'm hoping it will be soon, but...
Show us your poster there. Well, yeah, there we go. What's your second book about?
Terraforming Mars.
Okay.
Not that we're going to do it anytime soon. In the book, I talk about, maybe this could start 100 years from now or something. But it actually, with the only technology that we would need that we don't have now is better propulsion, like maybe fusion propulsion or something like that. Because part of the terraforming is you have to crash big things into Mars to release CO2 to have an atmosphere.
Okay.
And you can't push those kind of things around with the rockets we have today. Other than that, you actually can terraform Mars. It just is way beyond the scope of anything that we would try to do currently. For example, you have to build a superconductor around the entire equator to have a magnetic field.
Okay.
That's something that is technically feasible to do, but way beyond the scope of anything we're prepared to do.
left for future generations, maybe. But that's a popular subject in science fiction: is creating an Earth-like atmosphere and on Mars, terraforming it or making it Earth-like on there. So, well, best of luck to you, Frank. I've certainly
Thank you.
enjoyed you being on Stay Curious, and look forward to you maybe coming on again and talking some about your shuttle career there that we're always fascinated with, and have your wife Ann on here one day, quite possibly. So, Marty,
Like-
yes,
Yeah.
do you have something else to say?
No, it's just that I know Ann, obviously not as much as Frank, but that'll be a coup to get Ann on this
Oh,
show.
okay.
Now, his sister-in-law, Nora Levinka, I think that's maybe a possibility. She
Well,
worked
good.
If Frank said she worked ECLS, Environmental Control Systems.
Yes.
Well, we'll effort that, and we're always looking forward to space workers and other workers in the industry on Stay Curious, as that's what we love sharing here at the American Space Museum, is space workers that we call national treasures. Here at the American Space Museum, we've been preserving the history of America's space age for over 22 years, and we hope that you find it in your heart to come and see us or contribute to our nonprofit in financial ways. We're always willing to and need bushel baskets full of $100 bills to keep things rolling around here, and we appreciate everyone who does contribute their tax deductible and generous donations. So with that, thanks again, Frank. I really enjoyed it a lot. I'm going to look forward to reading your book and learning some about the technical aspects of how we're going to live on Mars. And I think everyone will be watching that Starship test here in the next 3 or 4 weeks. It's going to be the next one with more enthusiasm as you took us inside that Starship. So, Frank, thanks again. Until next time, tomorrow we got Terry White coming on to talk about all of those pit stops that the shuttle did in his garage there, the orbital processing facility. We're going to talk about NASA acronyms a little bit too, to drive everybody crazy. So until tomorrow with Terry White, I'm Mark Marquette saying we can't wait to see you in our building to bridge the space between us.